We're guided by the lessons of history and a desire to promote stability all over, and strength in our land. This destructive cycle of intervention and chaos must finally, folks, come to an end.
Welcome back to the Lead. That was President-elect Donald Trump on Tuesday night vowing to scale back U.S. intervention overseas, all part of his America First policy. Joining me now to talk about this and more, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat of Hawaii, I guess you say. She serves on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Jake. Always good to see you.
So let me ask you a question. Do you agree with Donald Trump's vision of America First when it comes to foreign policy?
I'm glad to hear him talking about ending our country's interventionist regime change war policies. As you know, this is something that I've been talking about for years, that we need to stop the destruction that's been caused by our country continuously getting involved in these counterproductive regime change wars that not only end up strengthening our enemy in groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but they actually end up causing more suffering for the people in these countries where we are intervening, as in Syria now.
I know you feel that way about Syria and Libya and Iraq. Do you feel that way about Afghanistan?
Afghanistan is a little bit of a different situation,
right, okay.
but yes, essentially.
You met with Donald Trump 2 weeks after he was elected. There was some speculation that he might offer you a cabinet position or some sort of position. Were you hoping to work in the Trump administration?
I love my job. The people of Hawaii chose to rehire me again in November, and I look forward to continuing to work for them. My goal in going there, in receiving the invitation to speak to President-elect Trump, was to speak specifically about the situation in Syria, the dangerous consequences of escalating the regime change war that the United States is fueling there, along with countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey, escalating that through a so-called no-fly zone or safe zone, and urging him to end our regime change war there, to stop funding, both directly and indirectly, groups that are working with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and to stop funneling those dollars and weapons and other assistance through these other countries like Saudi Arabia, who are directly supporting these terrorist groups, who are supposed to be our enemy, who we're supposed to be fighting to defeat.
And tell me about the legislation. You have a bill that you introduced today that would address loopholes you say have allowed American taxpayer dollars to fund terror groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. Are you really suggesting that the U.S. government is funding these terrorist groups?
I'm not only suggesting it. This is the reality that we're living in. And
not directly,
most
though. Americans,
you know, if you or I were to go and provide money, weapons, or support or whatever to a group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, we would immediately be thrown in jail. However, the U.S. government has been providing money, weapons, intel assistance, and other types of support through the CIA directly to these groups that are working with and are affiliated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
So you're saying the CIA is giving money to groups in Syria, and those groups are working with al-Nusra and ISIS? There
have been numerous reports from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal and other news outlets who have declared that these rebel groups have formed these battlefield alliances with Al-Qaeda, that essentially these Al-Qaeda groups are in charge of every single rebel group on the ground fighting in Syria to overthrow the Syrian government.
Now, the U.S. government says that they vet the groups that they give money to very, very closely, and that you're wrong. There are not alliances between groups that the American taxpayers fund and these other groups. Obviously, they all are fighting Assad.
I beg to differ. Evidence has shown time and time again that is not the case, that we are both directly and indirectly supporting these groups who are allied with, are partnered with Al-Qaeda and ISIS in working to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad. And we've also been providing that support through countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar to do that.
Quickly before you go, I know that some of your colleagues, Democrats, have expressed concern about too many retired generals being in the Trump cabinet. You have the National Security Advisor, General Flynn, and then also he's talked about General Mattis and General Kelly at the Pentagon and Homeland Security. Do you share their concerns, or do you disagree?
I don't share their concerns. In fact, as a veteran and as someone who's still serving in the Hawaii Army National Guard, I find it pretty offensive for people to outright discriminate against veterans. Here you have generals who have literally spent their whole lives serving our country, putting service before self, putting their lives on the line to defend democracy. And yet people are criticizing them and discriminating against them, saying just because you served as a general previously, you are disqualified from serving in a high position of leadership in our government. These people arguably have put far more on the line and are far more deeply personally committed to upholding and protecting our democracy than their critics.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much. Always good to see you. From a World War II fighter pilot